New York Giants storm into FedEx Field Sunday night to take on the Washington Commanders in a battle for what could be the last playoff spot. Up next, I'll have matchups, who to watch, what needs to happen that didn't happen in the tie, injury reports, predictions, and much, much more. Don't go nowhere. What's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Tommy's Takes. I'm your host, Tommy G. Thank you once again for joining. Please like, subscribe, turn those notifications on. Make sure you're the first one to get the content. You could also check me out on Twitter at TommyG105. I am a part of the Giants Country team. Please do check out all the content we are pumping out, whether it's articles, podcasts, interviews, you name it, we got it. For those that have already supported, thank you. This season is starting to wind down, and a huge game Sunday night at FedEx Field. The Giants and the Washington Commanders. Seems like they just played, right? Well, they did 2 weeks ago, ended in a tie. This one is a lot bigger stakes. You know, playoff percentages dip from the 80 percentile to the 20 percentile for a loss for either one of these teams. Like I said, they just faced off in a tie. This one's in FedEx Field, prime time, Sunday night on NBC. To say the stakes are high are an understatement. And it seems like they're a little bit higher for the Giants. They come in as a 4-point underdog, 1-4-1 in their last 6 games, clinging to the number 7 and final playoff spot. New York does lead the all-time series for anybody that cares to know, 105-71. So, you know, a chance not only to put a stranglehold on that final playoff spot, but to put the end to some bad history for the G-men. Same thing with Daniel Jones, has yet to win a game on prime time. Here you go. Giants are 0 for their last 11 in prime time. Jones is 0 for 9. So this is a huge opportunity. And you want to talk about the Giants starting to reel a little bit here, starting to give away some of that positive energy, some of that positive rebuild that's been happening in the first half of the season. They could put a stop to all the negativity here. You got a big game, divisional game, prime time, NBC. Like I said, you could lose and have a 20% chance of making the playoffs, or you could win and get bumped up into the upper 80 percentage. You do the math on that one. This one is huge. And you know what? Going back to the last game these two teams faced each other, very, very equally matched. You know, if you watch that game, I thought the Giants should have won that by 2 scores. Unfortunately, they decided to start beating themselves late in the third, early in the fourth, and it never got any better. Last 4 offensive drives for the Giants that day netted, I think, 2 yards. Not going to cut it this week, and the Commanders are red hot. We just did the review for them 2 weeks ago, so I'm not going to be too redundant and get into too much. But when you play a red hot team at home, you got to bring your A game. This can't be one of those games where Saquon has, 20 rushes for 52 yards and Jones throws for 160 yards and a touchdown. They're going to have to step their game up because that wasn't enough the last time around. It's not going to be enough now. The Commanders have the 6th seed right now in the NFC, and they've essentially had 3 weeks to prepare for the Giants. So they're going to come out rolling, and they're led by Taylor Heineke, who, for all intents and purposes, played pretty well 2 weeks ago in Jersey. He had a 101.2 QB rating, led the team downfield in the closing minutes for the game-tying touchdown, had that critical 4th down that he converted when he scrambled out. Giants secondary totally fell apart on that drive, especially tackling-wise. And tackling something I'm looking for this game that needs to happen. Giants have been poor tackling all year, but it's starting to progressively get worse. And no more shining example than that last drive for the Commanders. I think I counted 5 missed tackles on that drive alone. So Carson Wentz appears to be back healthy. Don't think you're going to see him Sunday unless, Heineke, the wheels fall off, throws a couple early picks, turnovers, Giants take a lead. I don't think Ron Rivera is going to want to mess around with any of that team chemistry. And listen, when it comes to Heineke, never going to dazzle you with numbers, not going to have a lot of wow plays, but he always seems to wake up just in time to make that clutch play. And the team rallies around him. This team loves Tyler Heineke. That's one thing about this Washington team, and you've seen it in previous years. That's why he's stuck around. They got Wentz. Wentz struggled to start the season. This Washington team, and when I looked at it on film, this Washington team, from when Wentz was starting to when Heineke was starting, completely different teams, even defensively. That shows the impact having someone like Heineke could bring to a team. Someone that in the clutch is going to make that play. He's not going to make that critical turnover. So I don't think you're going to see Wentz back anytime soon. And I think that's the right move to make. Washington run game, just seen it again, led by promising rookie Brian Robinson, torched the G-Man last matchup, 21 carries, 96 yards. He had over a 4.6 yard per carry average. Washington rushed for 165 yards in that last matchup. So listen, if you watch the Giants all season long, you know their Achilles heel is run defense. First, they struggled up the middle, stopping the run for the first 6-7 games. Now, all of a sudden, they can't set an edge. Anytime a team gets out on the edge, and it was ridiculous with the Eagles last week. If you watch that Eagles game, they torched that right side of the Giants' defensive line. Hurts killed that right side. So did Miles Sanders. So the ends, listen, Thibodeau has had a very good season as a rookie. Jihad Ward has played above his level. Aziz is just getting back. They need to set that edge. This can't be a game where Brian Robinson gets another 100 yards rushing. I don't think Gibson is going to play. If he did, you can't have him chipping in. You can't have Heineke breaking free. Because, listen, when it comes to rushing and stopping the run, this Giants team has struggled mightily. And Wink just came out and said, and he basically said in not so many words, I've tried it all. I've been trying to plug the holes here, and they're just more water's coming out. So Giants really need to step their game up. When it comes to the other parts of the Washington offense, Giants had a hard time covering Terry McLaurin, let's be honest. 8 catches, 105 yards, a touchdown. Not a good matchup for the Giants. And once again, we're going to be without Adoree Jackson and Xavier McKinney. This Giants secondary has struggled mightily in the last few weeks. Defensively, Washington, I'd say middle of the pack, especially when it comes to the pass. Solid against the run, which should be interesting to see if number 1 overall pick, Chase Young, makes his debut finally. Tore his ACL last year in November. So it's going to be very interesting to see if he gets in there. If he does, you have a defensive line for this Washington team that has 4 first-round picks on it. Chase Young will be the 5th, right? So that's going to be interesting to see. He's been out all season after tearing his ACL. Ron Rivera has been non-committal about Young playing this week. And like I said, their D-line is stacked. So they don't really need to rush him back and force him to come back in there because what's the purpose? You already have Jonathan Allen. You have Sweat. You have a very, very good defensive line. And Chase is going to add to that. And as a Giants fan, you hope he doesn't add to that this week. So he's probably going to still be out. And let's get to the Giants. Get straight to it. Reeling, lost 4 of their last 5. Barely holding on to the final playoff spot. Last week, absolutely destroyed at home to the Eagles in a game that wasn't even as close as the box score would indicate. Injuries have besieged this Giants team from every single angle, and it's still happening. Ellerson Smith blocks a punt versus the Eagles. He's put on the IR now. It's been a never-ending story, still haunting them. The Adoree and Xavier McKinney injuries being probably the 2 most critical. You could see how the Eagles just ran through the Giants secondary last week with Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown. Washington also had their way versus the Giants in the secondary, like I mentioned earlier. McLaurin had 100 yards receiving, but the show must go on. And also haunting the Giants is the mystery surrounding Saquon Barkley. Hasn't rushed for more than 3.6 yards per carry over the last 4 games. 4 straight games now where he hasn't been able to get it done. And what's the drop-off? When you look at Saquon and you look at what's happened here with him, and, make no mistake, Saquon Barkley was the Giants' offense and is the Giants' offense. So when you go through some of these things, what could it be with Saquon Barkley, right? First, the schedule has gotten significantly harder, let's be honest. The Giants had a softest schedule in the first half. I think they played at one point in that first half 4 of the 5 bottom Russian defense teams. That's always going to aid in padding some stats. So I think that's really hurt the Giants down this stretch. Harder defenses equal less production typically for an offense. You also have the Giants' offensive line has taken a massive step back. They've had their injuries, Neal, Bredesen, Feliciano. The only one that's not back is Bredesen, and this offensive line is still struggling. They're struggling to make holes for Barkley. He hasn't really had the burst that he had in the beginning of the season. And, what about run blitzes, right? Teams are starting to run blitz the hell out of the Giants. And you've seen it in the last couple of games. They're getting creative with run blitzes. They're not paying attention to the play action the Giants are doing. Kafka has to do a better job picking his spots with play action. He can't call play action on a 7 and 10 and expect play action run and expect linebackers to respect that. It's all over the film. The linebackers are not respecting that Giants play action. It's almost like they know when the run's coming and the pass is coming. Has to have a change there, particularly against those run blitzes. And teams are blitzing the Giants, put a number on it, about 15, 16% more than they were during that 6-2 stretch. Something to keep an eye on. And like I said, Kafka has to figure a way out, has to figure a way to counteract that, because Saquon has just basically been a sitting duck, and he's not going to get any better that way. It's just not going to happen. And, let's get to the meat and potatoes now with Saquon. He's 10 carries away from going over his career high for carries. He hurt the shoulder versus Green Bay. That shoulder could have subsequently turned into the neck injury that he has now, which is not good. And he just looks tired. He looks worn down. And it's been tough to see. I know Giants fans, tough to see. He's their superstar, the face of their franchise. So we never want to see a player out there like that. But he says he's healthy. He's not on the injury report. I don't know. I don't know when it comes to Barkley. It's hard to single out really any single reason for why he struggled or why the Giants' running game has fallen off. I just think it's collective. I think it's a collective, between the line, between his carries, the injuries. Giants have no passing game, so you don't have that passing game to lean on for Saquon to get back there, and he doesn't have to look at 9, 10 men in the box when he steps in there. That's another big part. This passing offense has to get it going. And Daniel Jones, I think, has done a pretty good job, with a limited wide receiver corp, a struggling offensive line, a disappearing running game. Still, though, I have seen plays left on the field. And that's something that, you can attribute that to having an offensive line that's leaking and pressure getting right in there. Having receivers that might not be in the right spot. Yeah, they look open, and yeah, he should probably throw it. Maybe that's not what's happening. It's always tough when you watch film and you don't know the intricacies of the strategies, the offensive philosophy, the progressions, whatever it may have you. But you have seen some plays left out there. But overall, I think he's done a really good job. Only 4 interceptions for the year. He's limited the turnovers, career high in rushing. I will say, in spots, this offense has been absolutely brutal. I think overall they've been mediocre. Last time versus Washington, when they had those 4 drives at the end of the game, produced absolutely nothing. That's unacceptable. That can't happen. That cannot happen again this week versus Washington. I think Danny could do a better job trusting himself, trusting the receivers on his team. Offensive line has to block better. And what's tough is the Giants probably have the worst wide receiving core in the league. Let's be honest. When they came into this season, they had Sterling Shepard. He's out for the season-ending injury. They had Kadarius Toney. He's gone, shipped to Kansas City. They had Wan'Dale Robinson, who was just hitting his stride, just had his first 100-yard game. Boom, he's out for the season. So now you're left with Darius Slayton, Richie James. You're left with a hodgepodge of guys. And, it's really affected Jones. But the positives are there. Is it enough to get him a new contract? That's going to be a different time, a different show. Before we move on to the next segment, drop your predictions in the comments. Whoever gets the score right this week gets a special Giants collectible out of my collection. So stop now, drop the comments, boom. Okay, injury report. Every Giants fan's favorite part of the show, the injury report. Just kidding. Giants did not practice. You got Adoree, Richie James, Shane Lemieux. Ward was also on there. Limited, you have Bellinger, McLeod. You have Leonard Williams limited. McFadden is limited. So you got some guys on there that haven't been on there that are popping up. I think for the majority will play. I can't, obviously, Azudu, Adoree, Lemieux are not going to play. Richie James, second concussion in a few weeks. That's going to be a tough one. That'll really hurt the Giants' passing offense if he doesn't play. Giants are already extremely thin at wide receiver. For the Commanders, seems like every week the same thing. The opponent's injury report is like this big, and the Giants is like a scroll. So for the Commanders, you have limited, did not practice, none. Limited, you have Gibson with a foot. You have Montez Sweat with a concussion. That's one to watch. And you also, like I said, mentioned Chase Young earlier. Does he finally come back? I don't think this is the week he'll make it back, but you never know. We'll see what happens with Young. That's the injury report. Again, Giants always winning on the injury report, but losing at the same time. And I just talked about this, on Twitter. You can't change a roster over in 2 years completely. Unless you have unlimited funds, unless you have unlimited draft picks, it's just virtually impossible. But at some point, Joe Shane has to figure out this injury problem because you could make a case for injuries totally derailing this season for the Giants. And it's still going on. Like I said, you have Ellerson Smith blocks the punt last week. Boom, he's gone for the season. So it's really been ridiculous. And, I don't envy Joe Shane and the Giants front office and the coaching staff to try to have to figure this thing out, figure what's causing these injuries. Is it the turf? Is it the training staff? Are they just drafting players that tend to get injured too often? Who knows? And it could be a mixture of everything. But eventually, have to get past this because this season could have looked a lot different, even going into Sunday night now. If you would have had a Dory Jackson, should have never been returning punts. If you would have had Xavier McKinney, should have stayed away from the ATVs. This season could have looked a lot different for the Giants. But listen, everything's still in front of them. If the season ended right now, they'd have a playoff spot. Still have to focus in, lock in Sunday night. And there's going to be a couple of matchups I'm looking for, a couple of matchups that, really popped last game. First one's going to be Daniel Jones against the Washington defense. Let's be honest. If Saquon comes out again flat, doesn't have that burst, if the offensive line can't open holes for him, it's going to be up to DJ. And he's going to have to pass this team to a win, which he has struggled with, especially in the last 4 or 5 weeks. Offensive line has to help Daniel Jones. He's one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the NFL. I mentioned the week before, he has over 118 combined sacks, hits, and hurries. And that number just went up against Philly last week as they dominated the Giants' offensive line once again. So for Daniel Jones, he's going to need protection. He's going to have to trust himself. Going to have to take some deep shots unless the Giants could recapture that magic with their running game. If they could recapture that magic, then DJ could stay in his play actions, his bootleg rollouts. That's the key here. The Giants have to stay balanced. And that leads me to the next matchup. And we've talked about it, ad nauseum already today, and that's Barkley against this Commanders' run defense. And the Commanders don't have the best run defense, but Barkley's struggling. 3.6 or less, 4 straight games. Does look a little bit tired out there. Like I said, nobody can pinpoint why. He came out yesterday. He said, I'm healthy. I'm ready to go. I'm excited. This Giants offense goes as Saquon Barkley goes. And if he can get going, again, it takes the heat off Jones. That takes the heat off of a struggling passing game. You could eat up some clock, especially if you can get a turnover and eat some clock. Double duty right there. Those are 2 big ones and obvious ones because the Giants offense right now is basically Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones. And you've had some players that have contributed. Darius Slayton, Daniel Bellinger, Hodgins has contributed. Shout out to him. I don't want to forget him. But these are the 2 guys. These are your 2 aces. And one of them has to play at a high level Sunday night. Now I want to do the biggest key. This is my biggest key matchup for Sunday. And it's the Giants' offensive line versus the defensive line of Washington. And this offensive line for the Giants has started to really struggle. And you thought they would be ascending at this point. They have Andrew Thomas, number 4 overall pick at left tackle. They have Evan Neal, who they drafted last year, number 7 overall pick at right tackle. They invested some money in the offseason to Mark Lewinsky from Indy, John Feliciano from Buffalo. You drafted Azudu. It's unfortunate he's been hurt. So you would think at the very least at this point in the season, this offensive line would be trending upwards, would be starting to gel, mesh more. Obviously, injuries, again, on the offensive line have hurt them, but they got to do better. I mean, this Giants offensive line was eaten up last week versus the Eagles on the ground. No holes opened up for Barkley. Pass blocking. Jones was sacked 4 times, constantly hurried on the run. And, this Washington defensive line, they sacked Jones 4 times. They have possibly 5 first-round picks playing, including Chase Young, who, if he comes back, it's going to be tough for the Giants. So this is a big game for Evan Neal. This is a big game for Andrew Thomas, John Feliciano, Mark Lewinsky. This is time now. This is crunch time. This cannot be a game where Jones, has to throw 2 and 3 yard passes, can't hit his 3-step drop. They're running, play action bootleg rollouts the whole game, moving pockets the whole game. Yeah, that could work in spurts, and it has worked in spurts. And I think for the most part, Kafka has done a pretty good job working around a porous offensive line. But at the end of the day, you got to get back there. You got to be able to hit your drop. You got to be able to scan the field. You got to be able to go through progressions. It's been so tough to watch this season when you watch the film and you see some great play calls, some great progressions, and guys hitting on double moves. But by the time the guy hits his double move, Jones is already getting pressured out or being taken down or having to scramble out of the pocket. That has to change this game. That can't happen again what happened versus Washington. And I personally think the Giants can take this game. I think they should have won 2 weeks ago. They were up 20-13 late. You had the Feliciano stupid taunting penalty, whether you like it or not. Don't even give the refs a chance to call that. The Giants had Washington on the ropes. Even in overtime, Gano misses the 58-yard field goal, unfortunately. The game was right there. This is going to be a different story, though. You have a Washington team that's at home, well-rested coming off of a bye, possibly having their, one of their top overall picks, Chase Young, back. You have a quarterback that's playing confident, a rookie running back in Robinson that's starting to look very, very good. And you have a Commanders team that is going for 8 wins. Both these teams are going for that elusive 8th win. And I would say, honestly, the team that wins this game is probably going to the playoffs. And if you're the Giants, you don't have many easy gimmies left. You have Indy, who has struggled. That's basically it, because you have Philly and Minnesota, 2 teams that are going to be in the playoffs. And maybe Philly rests their starters at the last game of the season. But do you want to count on that? Do you want to count on your division rival, Philadelphia Eagles, sitting their starters for you to get in the playoffs? I'm not sure that would happen, honestly. I'm not sure if the Eagles would do that. If Sirianni would say, hey, just let the Giants in the playoffs. We've beat them twice already. It's easy to beat the team 3 times in a season. We know it's not. So I wouldn't count on that. Giants have to take care of business Sunday night, have to run the ball effectively. If they cannot, Daniel Jones, you want the big contract, you want the big bucks, go out there and make it happen. You pray and you hope that the offensive line could at least play a decent game to give him some time to throw the ball. And if he does throw the ball, let's catch it. If you're Darius Slayton, catch the ball. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a toss-up. I give it to the Giants, 20-13. I think the defense plays well. Hopefully Leo plays and you have that fearsome foursome together. We've seen in spurts what they could do together. And I think if the Giants D-line could hold this down, keep pressure on Heineke, they did a solid job of putting pressure on him 2 weeks ago. I think the Giants could take it. Obviously the injuries are holding the Giants back. It's probably not getting much better anytime soon. Looks like Bredesen's not going to play again. Adoree and McKinney might not even be back this year. You got to go out there and tough it out. And if you're the coaching staff, you want to put some goodwill back in this season, because it's been a while. It's been a month since you had some goodwill. And after a terrific start and, being the toast of the town, if you're Brian Dable and Joe Shane, things are kind of taking a little turn here, a little downward turn. And listen, it's a rebuild. Nothing that happens these last 4 games are ultimately going to affect the rebuild negatively. But you can affect that rebuild positively by having a big divisional win, by getting that 8th victory, setting sail, and getting yourself towards that playoff berth. That's it for today's show. Before we head out of here, stop, drop those comments, put your score, predict it. If you want to pick Washington, I'd rather you not, but if you do and you win, I'll give you something. Drop those scores, drop some good comments. Let's engage. I love Giants fans. I love engaging with everybody. Please like, subscribe, turn those notifications on. If you haven't, check me out on Twitter, TommyG105. I'll be posting some hot takes there, some stuff you might not see here. And please do check out the Giants Country Team. Again, dropping the hottest articles, interviews, podcasts, you name it, we got it. And listen, ain't many games left. You got 4 games left, and it's going to be a long off season. So let's lock in. Giants fans need a big win this Sunday. You want to have more than 4 games left. Make sure you keep it locked to Tommy's Takes. I'll be back here after the game Sunday so we can hopefully break down the Giants W. Thank you, everybody. Peace.